The morning fog rolled across the Naval Special Warfare Command compound in Coronado, California. Inside the main briefing room, 24 of America's most elite warriors sat around a rectangular table made of polished oak. These men had survived Hell Week. They had completed missions in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and places whose names never appeared in newspapers. Each one carried scars, both visible and hidden, from years of service to their country. The meeting had been called for 0800 hours sharp. No one knew exactly why they were there, only that the summons had come from the highest levels of Naval Special Warfare Command. The invitation simply read, "Mandatory attendance. Operational briefing. Classified." Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his dress blue uniform and checked his watch. 37 years old, with 15 years in the teams, he had seen almost everything the military could throw at a person. His weathered hands bore the marks of countless repelling operations, and a scar ran along his left temple from shrapnel in Fallujah. Rodriguez commanded respect among his peers, not just for his tactical expertise, but for his ability to lead men through impossible situations and bring them all home alive. To his left sat Petty Officer First Class James Tank Morrison, a mountain of a man whose nickname came from his ability to carry equipment loads that would break most people. Tank had joined the SEALs straight from a small farming town in Iowa, bringing with him the work ethic that came from getting up before dawn to milk cows and tend crops. His massive frame filled out his uniform, and, despite his intimidating appearance, he possessed a gentle nature that made him beloved by his teammates. Across the table, Senior Chief Petty Officer David Chen reviewed his notes from the previous day's training exercise. At 42, Chen was one of the older members of the group, a veteran of more deployments than he cared to count. His expertise lay in underwater demolition and maritime operations. Chen had earned his reputation during a hostage rescue mission off the coast of Somalia, where he had spent 4 hours underwater in shark-infested waters to plant charges on a hijacked vessel. The mission had saved 37 innocent lives. The room buzzed with quiet conversation as the SEALs speculated about the purpose of their gathering. Some thought it might be preparation for a new deployment. Others wondered if they were about to receive briefings on updated equipment or tactics. A few suspected it might be related to the recent restructuring of Special Operations Command. Petty Officer Second Class Anthony Ace Williams sat near the back of the room, his fingers drumming silently on the table. At 28, Ace was among the younger members of the group, but his reputation as a sniper was already legendary within the community. During his last deployment to Afghanistan, Ace had made a shot that saved an entire patrol from an ambush, hitting a target at a distance that pushed the boundaries of what most people thought possible with a rifle. The conversation died down as footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Someone was approaching, and, by the sound of it, they were not alone. The SEALs straightened in their chairs, their military bearing taking over as they prepared to show proper respect to whatever officer was about to enter their briefing room. The door handle turned with a soft click that seemed to echo through the suddenly silent room. Every eye focused on that door, wondering who would walk through and what mission they might be about to receive. These men had worked with generals, admirals, CIA operatives, and foreign military leaders. They had received briefings from some of the most powerful people in the American defense establishment. But nothing had prepared them for what happened next. The door swung open, and a woman stepped into the room. She wore the dress blue uniform of a Navy commander, her ribbons and decorations immediately marking her as someone with serious operational experience. Her posture was confident but not arrogant, professional but approachable. She appeared to be in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation style and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the room in a single glance. What happened next had never occurred in the history of that briefing room. Without a word being spoken, without any formal announcement of her rank or position, every single SEAL in the room stood up. Not the casual rising that might greet any officer, but the sharp, respectful movement of men who recognized something special when they saw it. 24 hardened warriors, men who had faced death in a dozen countries, rose to their feet in perfect unison. The woman's name was Commander Sarah Mitchell, though none of the SEALs knew that yet. What they sensed, in that indefinable way that warriors recognize other warriors, was that this person had earned the right to their respect through actions, not just rank. Commander Mitchell stepped to the front of the room, her movements economical and purposeful. She set a briefcase on the table and looked around at the assembled SEALs, making eye contact with several of them. Her expression was serious but not stern, professional but not cold. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice clear and steady, "please be seated." The SEALs settled back into their chairs, but the atmosphere in the room had changed. There was an electricity in the air, a sense that they were in the presence of someone extraordinary. These were men accustomed to following orders from superior officers, but this felt different. This felt like they were about to follow someone who had walked the same dangerous paths they had walked. Rodriguez found himself studying the woman's ribbons and decorations more closely. He could make out several that indicated combat deployments, including some that suggested involvement in highly classified operations. There was a purple heart among her decorations, indicating she had been wounded in action. But it was more than just the medals that commanded respect. It was something in her bearing, something that spoke of hard-earned experience and tested courage. Commander Mitchell opened her briefcase and removed a single folder marked with security classifications that made even these experienced operators take notice. She placed it on the table but did not immediately open it. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to address what just happened when I walked into this room." The SEALs exchanged glances, wondering if they had somehow violated protocol. But Commander Mitchell's next words surprised them. "In my 20 years of military service, I have never walked into a room and had every person present stand without being ordered to do so. It tells me that you gentlemen understand something that not everyone in our business grasps." She paused, her eyes moving around the room. "Respect is not automatic. It is earned. And it is given when it is deserved, regardless of what someone's collar insignia might say." Tank Morrison shifted in his chair, intrigued by this unusual beginning to what he had expected to be a routine briefing. Commander Mitchell continued. "What you sensed when I walked in here was correct. I have been where you have been. I have done what you have done. And I am here today because there is a mission that requires not just your skills, but your trust." She opened the folder and removed several photographs, spreading them across the table where all the SEALs could see them. The images showed a compound in what appeared to be a Middle Eastern country, with detailed shots of buildings, guard positions, and potential entry points. 3 days ago, a team of American engineers working on a humanitarian water project in northern Syria was taken hostage by a group calling itself the Desert Liberation Front. The engineers were drilling wells to provide clean water to refugee camps when they were ambushed and captured. Chen leaned forward, his expertise in maritime operations making him wonder if this might involve an approach from the Mediterranean coast. "Intelligence indicates the hostages are being held in a compound approximately 40 kilometers east of Aleppo. The group holding them has made demands that the United States government cannot and will not meet. They have given us 72 hours to respond, or they will begin executing the hostages one by one." Commander Mitchell turned over another photograph, showing satellite imagery of the target compound. "This is not a standard rescue mission, gentlemen. The compound is heavily fortified, located in an area where we have no official military presence, and surrounded by civilians who cannot be placed at risk during any rescue attempt." Ace Williams studied the photographs with the trained eye of a sniper, already calculating angles and distances. The compound would be a challenging target under the best of circumstances, but the presence of civilians made it exponentially more difficult. "The mission will require insertion via halo jump into hostile territory, approach on foot across 30 kilometers of desert terrain, and execution of a precision rescue operation without causing casualties among the civilian population in the surrounding area." Commander Mitchell's voice remained steady as she outlined the daunting requirements. "Extraction will be via helicopter from a landing zone that will have to be secured under fire." Rodriguez had participated in dozens of similar operations, but the parameters of this mission made it one of the most challenging he had ever heard described. The combination of the terrain, the civilian population, and the tight timeline created a scenario with very little margin for error. "I know what you're thinking," Commander Mitchell said, and several of the SEALs were surprised by her ability to read their expressions. "This mission has a low probability of success using conventional approaches. That's why it requires something different. Something that has never been attempted before. She reached back into her briefcase and removed another set of documents. What I am about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. 3 years ago, I led a joint operation in Afghanistan that rescued 14 captured aid workers from a Taliban compound. The operation succeeded because we used tactics and equipment that had never been tried in that type of scenario before. The room remained silent as the SEALs absorbed this information. Commander Mitchell continued. That operation required innovations in everything from infiltration techniques to communication protocols to extraction procedures. It worked because the team involved was willing to trust each other completely and to execute a plan that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. She spread out the new documents, revealing detailed tactical plans and equipment specifications that made even these experienced operators raise their eyebrows. This mission will require the same level of innovation and trust. It will also require something else that is unusual for operations of this type. Commander Mitchell paused, making eye contact with several of the SEALs around the table. It will require you to trust the tactical judgment of someone who has never served as a SEAL. The implications of that statement hung in the air as the men in the room began to understand what Commander Mitchell was telling them. I will be leading this mission personally. Not from a command post, not from a safe distance, but on the ground with you. She let that sink in before continuing. I know that goes against standard protocol. I know it raises questions about command structure and operational security. But this mission cannot succeed without someone who has specific experience with the type of innovations it will require. Rodriguez found himself re-evaluating everything he thought he knew about this briefing. In his 15 years with the teams, he had never heard of an operation where a non-SEAL officer would be embedded with a SEAL team for a direct action mission. I am not asking you to follow me because of my rank, Commander Mitchell said. I am asking you to follow me because of my experience. Because I have succeeded in situations similar to this one before. And because the lives of 4 innocent Americans depend on our ability to work together as a team. She closed the folder and stood up straight, her hands clasped behind her back in a posture that conveyed both confidence and respect for the men she was addressing. This briefing will continue tomorrow morning at 0600 hours. At that time, I will provide you with the complete operational plan and give each of you the opportunity to volunteer for or decline participation in this mission. No one who chooses not to participate will face any negative consequences or questions about their decision. Commander Mitchell picked up her briefcase and moved toward the door. Just before she reached it, she turned back to face the assembled SEALs. One more thing, gentlemen. When you leave this room, you will undoubtedly discuss what has happened here today. You will speculate about who I am and what qualifies me to lead this type of operation. That's natural and expected. She paused. What I ask is that you remember what you felt when I first walked into this room. Trust that instinct. It has kept you alive in places where trusting the wrong person would have meant death. With that, Commander Mitchell left the room, leaving behind 24 of America's most elite warriors with more questions than answers and a decision that could affect the rest of their careers. The silence lasted for nearly a full minute before Rodriguez finally spoke. Well, he said quietly, that was definitely not what I expected when I got up this morning. The mess hall buzzed with conversation that evening, but table 12 in the far corner remained unusually quiet. Rodriguez, Tank, Chen, and Ace sat with their dinner trays, each man lost in his own thoughts about the morning's briefing. Around them, other sailors discussed everything from the latest baseball scores to weekend liberty plans, but the 4 SEALs seemed disconnected from the normal rhythm of base life. Rodriguez pushed his mashed potatoes around his plate, his mind replaying every detail of Commander Mitchell's presentation. In his 15 years with the teams, he had developed an instinct for reading people and situations. That instinct had kept him alive in Baghdad, Kabul, and a dozen other places where making the wrong judgment about someone could mean the difference between coming home and coming home in a box. So what do we think? Tank finally asked, breaking the silence that had settled over their table like a heavy blanket. Chen looked up from his untouched dinner. At 42, he was the oldest of the group, the one they all looked to when they needed perspective on complicated situations. His years of experience had taught him to be careful about snap judgments, but also to trust his gut when something felt right. I think, Chin said slowly, that we just met someone who's been places we haven't been and done things we haven't done. Ace nodded, remembering the confidence in Commander Mitchell's voice when she had described the mission parameters. Did you see her ribbons? That wasn't just desk duty decorations. Someone doesn't get a Purple Heart from pushing papers around the Pentagon. Rodriguez finally set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. What bothers me isn't what she told us. It's what she didn't tell us. He lowered his voice, even though their conversation couldn't be overheard above the general noise of the mess hall. She said she led a successful rescue operation in Afghanistan, but she didn't say what unit she was with or how she ended up in a position to lead a mission like that. The four men fell silent again, each wrestling with the implications of what they had heard. In the special operations community, information flowed through unofficial channels as much as official ones. People knew things about other people, operations became legends, and reputations were built on stories that were passed along in conversations just like this one. But none of them had ever heard of Commander Sarah Mitchell. Tank took a long drink of his coffee and set the cup down carefully. My dad used to tell me about people he met in Vietnam, he said quietly. He said there were some folks who showed up to do jobs that officially didn't exist, working for organizations that had no names, doing things that never got written down in any report. Chen nodded slowly. He had heard similar stories from older operators, tales of missions and people who existed in the shadows between the official military and the intelligence community. Maybe that's what we're dealing with here, Ace suggested. Someone who's been working the kind of operations that don't make it into the history books. Rodriguez considered this possibility. It would explain why none of them recognized her name or had heard stories about her previous operations. It would also explain why she seemed so confident about leading a mission that would challenge even the most experienced SEAL teams. There's something else, Rodriguez said, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. When she walked into that room this morning, every one of us stood up. Not because we were ordered to, not because protocol required it, but because something inside us recognized that we were in the presence of someone who had earned our respect. The other three men nodded. They had all felt it, that inexplicable sense that they were meeting someone who belonged in their world, someone who understood the weight of the responsibilities they carried and the sacrifices they had made. Shen had been thinking about that moment all day. You know what it reminded me of, he said. Remember that operator who came through here about 5 years ago? The one who never told us his real name, just went by Prophet? The others remembered. Prophet had been an older man, probably in his 50s, who had showed up to train with them for 2 weeks before disappearing as suddenly as he had arrived. He had never said what unit he was with or what mission he was preparing for, but his skills and knowledge had been beyond anything they had ever seen. Same feeling, Tank agreed. Like you were meeting someone who had seen the elephant and lived to tell about it. Except Prophet never asked us to follow him into combat, Ace pointed out. This is different. She's asking us to trust her with our lives on a mission that sounds impossible even by our standards. Rodriguez had been thinking about the mission parameters all day. A rescue operation in hostile territory, with civilians nearby, requiring precision that left no room for error. The kind of mission that could make careers or end them, depending on how it went. Let's talk about the mission itself, he said. Forget who's leading it for a minute. Just look at what needs to be done. Chin pulled out a small notebook and began sketching from memory, drawing the compound layout that Commander Mitchell had shown them that morning. 40 kilometers east of Aleppo. Heavily fortified position. Civilian population in the surrounding area. Hostages being held in what looked like the central building. Insertion by halo jump, Tank added. That means we're looking at a night jump from high altitude, probably 30,000+ feet to avoid radar detection. Ace studied Chen's rough sketch. The approach would have to be on foot across 30 kilometers of desert. That's a full night's movement, maybe more depending on the terrain and security situation. And then, there's the compound itself, Rodriguez said. From what we could see in the satellite photos, it's designed to be difficult to assault. High walls, limited entry points, overlapping fields of fire from the guard positions. The 4 SEALs continued analyzing the mission, breaking it down into the component parts that would need to be planned and executed with precision. The more they talked, the more they began to understand why Commander Mitchell had said it would require innovations that had never been tried before. The timeline is what really makes it challenging, Chen observed. 72 hours from the time she briefed us. That doesn't leave much room for extensive rehearsals or equipment modifications. Tank nodded grimly. Most operations like this get weeks or months of planning. We're looking at maybe 48 hours of actual prep time once we decide to go. If we decide to go, Ace corrected. Rodriguez looked around at his teammates, these men who had shared dangers and hardships that most people couldn't imagine. Are any of you seriously considering not volunteering? The question hung in the air for a moment before Chen answered. No, he said simply. For Americans are going to die if somebody doesn't go get them. The question isn't whether we volunteer. The question is whether we trust Commander Mitchell to lead us. And whether we trust ourselves to follow someone who isn't one of us, Tank added. Ace had been quiet while the others talked, but now he leaned forward across the table. You know what I keep thinking about? When she said that respect is earned, not automatic. When she said it's given when it's deserved, regardless of rank. What about it? Rodriguez asked. She was talking about us as much as herself, Ace explained. She was acknowledging that she needs to earn our respect, our trust. But she was also saying that she respects us enough to be honest about what this mission requires. Chen nodded slowly. Most officers would have come in there and given us a standard briefing, emphasizing the importance of following orders and maintaining discipline. She did the opposite. She told us to trust our instincts. Even if our instincts told us to question her, Tank added. Rodriguez felt a grudging admiration for Commander Mitchell's approach. By acknowledging the unusual nature of the situation, by giving them permission to have doubts, she had actually increased his confidence in her leadership. There's something else, he said. She's taking the same risks we are. She's not sending us on this mission from a safe command post. She's coming with us. That could be good or bad, Ace pointed out. Depends on whether she can keep up and contribute to the mission, or whether we end up having to protect her. Chen closed his notebook and looked around at his teammates. I guess we'll find out tomorrow morning when she shows us the full operational plan. Yeah, Rodriguez agreed. But I already know what I'm going to do. The others looked at him expectantly. I'm going to volunteer, he said simply. Not because I completely trust her yet, but because those 4 engineers don't deserve to die while we're sitting here debating whether their rescuer has the right qualifications. Tank nodded. Same here. Besides, if she turns out to be all talk and no action, we'll figure that out pretty quickly once we're on the ground. And if she's the real deal? Ace asked. Then, we learn something from her, Chen answered. And maybe we bring those hostages home alive. The 4 men sat quietly for a moment, each contemplating what the next few days might bring. Around them, the normal life of the base continued, but they were already beginning to shift into the mental space that preceded a dangerous mission. Rodriguez stood up first, gathering his tray. I'm going to go review the intelligence reports we have on the area around Aleppo. See if I can get a better feel for what we might be walking into. Good idea, Chen said. I'll check with the meteorology office, see what the weather picture looks like for the next few days. Wind conditions for the jump, visibility for the approach. Tank and Ace followed suit, each man instinctively beginning the preparations that had become second nature over years of operations. They would spend the evening gathering information, checking equipment, and mentally preparing for what could be one of the most challenging missions of their careers. As they walked out of the mess hall together, Rodriguez found himself thinking about Commander Mitchell's final words. Trust that instinct. It has kept you alive in places where trusting the wrong person would have meant death. His instinct told him that tomorrow morning would bring answers to some of their questions. It also told him that by tomorrow evening, they would either be preparing for a mission that could make history, or they would be wondering what they had gotten themselves into. Either way, for American lives hung in the balance, and that was really all that mattered. The base settled into its evening rhythm as the 4 SEALs went their separate ways, each carrying the weight of a decision that would affect not only their own lives, but the lives of strangers they had never met and might never see again. In less than 12 hours, they would learn whether their instincts about Commander Mitchell were correct. But, tonight, they prepared as they always had, with the methodical professionalism that had carried them through countless dangerous situations before. Tonight, they trusted their training, their experience, and each other. Tomorrow, they would find out if they could trust her too. The briefing room looked different at 0600 hours. Overnight, someone had installed additional communication equipment, and detailed maps of northern Syria covered every wall. The oak table now held laptops displaying real-time satellite imagery, and a large screen at the front of the room showed a three-dimensional model of the target compound. Commander Mitchell stood at the front of the room, but she was not alone. Beside her stood a tall man in civilian clothes whom none of the SEALs recognized. His bearing suggested military background, but his appearance was deliberately nondescript. Next to him was a woman in Air Force uniform with pilot's wings, and, behind them, a man in marine dress blues with the insignia of a colonel. All 24 SEALs had returned for the morning briefing. As they filed into the room and took their seats, Rodriguez noticed that everyone seemed more alert, more focused than they had been the day before. Whatever doubts or questions they had carried out of yesterday's meeting, they had come back ready to hear what Commander Mitchell had to say. "Gentlemen," Commander Mitchell began, "thank you for returning this morning. Before we begin the detailed briefing, I want to introduce the team that has been assembled for this operation." She gestured to the man in civilian clothes. "This is Agent Thompson from the Central Intelligence Agency. He has been coordinating intelligence gathering for this mission and will be providing real-time updates during the operation." Thompson nodded to the assembled SEALs but did not speak. Rodriguez noted the man's calm demeanor and the way his eyes constantly scanned the room, taking in details. "Definitely someone with field experience." "Major Rodriguez," Commander Mitchell continued, indicating the Air Force officer, "is our insertion and extraction pilot. She has more experience with high-altitude, low-opening insertions in hostile territory than anyone currently on active duty." The pilot stepped forward slightly. "I've reviewed the weather data and flight paths for the insertion. We have a narrow window of opportunity, but it's achievable." "Colonel Martinez," Commander Mitchell said, gesturing to the Marine officer, "will be coordinating with Theater Command to ensure we have the support we need without compromising operational security." Chen leaned forward slightly, impressed by the level of coordination that had obviously gone into planning this mission. This wasn't a hasty operation thrown together in response to a crisis. This was a carefully orchestrated effort involving multiple agencies and branches of the military. Commander Mitchell returned to the center of the room. "Now, let me show you exactly what we're going to do." She activated the large screen, and the three-dimensional model of the compound rotated slowly, showing every building, every wall, every guard position that intelligence had identified. Red dots marked the location of hostile forces, while green markers indicated the probable location of the hostages. "At 2100 hours tomorrow night, we will depart from Cyprus aboard a specially modified C-130. Our flight path will take us over international waters and then, along the Turkish border to avoid Syrian air defense systems." The screen changed to show the flight path, a careful route that avoided known surface-to-air missile sites and radar installations. "At 2300 hours, we will reach the drop zone. The aircraft will climb to 38,000 feet, and we will execute a halo jump from that altitude. The jump will put us down approximately 30 kilometers northwest of the target compound." Ace studied the map carefully. The drop zone was well outside the range of any ground-based detection systems, but it meant a long approach march across difficult terrain. "Once on the ground, we will have approximately 6 hours to reach the assault position. The approach route has been carefully planned to avoid known patrol patterns and observation posts." Tank raised his hand. "Ma'am, what about civilian populations along the approach route?" "Excellent question," Commander Mitchell replied. "Intelligence indicates that the area between the drop zone and the target has been largely abandoned due to fighting in the region. However, we have identified 3 locations where we may encounter refugees or displaced persons. The route has been planned to avoid these areas. She clicked to the next slide, showing the compound from above with detailed annotations. The target facility consists of 4 main buildings arranged around a central courtyard. Intelligence suggests the hostages are being held in the northeastern building, on the 2nd floor. Rodriguez studied the layout carefully. The compound was well designed from a defensive standpoint, with good lines of sight and limited approaches for attackers. Hostile forces consist of approximately 15 to 20 fighters, armed with small arms and at least 2 crew-served weapons. They have established guard positions at each corner of the compound and maintain regular patrols of the perimeter. Chen noted the locations of the crew-served weapons. Those would need to be neutralized quickly to prevent them from being used against the rescue team or the extraction aircraft. Commander Mitchell changed slides again, revealing what appeared to be a completely new type of tactical equipment. This is where the innovation I mentioned yesterday comes into play. What you're looking at is a prototype stealth insertion system that has never been used operationally. The image showed what looked like a cross between a parachute and a wing, with electronic components integrated throughout the fabric. The SEALs leaned forward, studying the unfamiliar equipment. This system allows for completely silent insertion from high altitude. Unlike a traditional parachute, it produces no sound signature and has a radar cross-section smaller than a bird. It also allows for much more precise control during descent, enabling us to land within meters of our intended target. Tank whistled softly. This was technology none of them had seen before, the kind of experimental equipment that usually took years to move from testing to operational use. Each member of the team will be equipped with one of these systems, along with traditional backup parachutes in case of malfunction. Major Rodriguez has trained extensively with this equipment and will be supervising its use during the operation. The Air Force pilot stepped forward again. The learning curve is steep, but manageable. We have approximately 18 hours to bring everyone up to operational proficiency. Commander Mitchell clicked to the next slide, showing the compound again, but this time with approach routes marked in different colors. The assault itself will be conducted in 3 phases. First, we neutralize the perimeter guards and crew-served weapons positions. Second, we breach the northeastern building and secure the hostages. Third, we establish a defensive perimeter and call in the extraction helicopter. Rodriguez studied the timing that appeared on the screen. The entire operation, from initial contact to extraction, was planned to take less than 20 minutes. Speed is essential, Commander Mitchell continued. Intelligence indicates that hostile reinforcements can reach the compound within 30 minutes of the alarm being raised. We need to be gone before they arrive. Chen raised his hand. Ma'am, what about the extraction helicopter? How do we ensure it can reach us safely? Colonel Martinez stepped forward to answer this question. The extraction will be conducted by a specially modified MH-60 with stealth capabilities similar to the aircraft used in the Bin Laden raid. It will approach from the west, using terrain features to mask its approach until the last possible moment. The sophistication of the operation was becoming clear to all the SEALs in the room. This wasn't just a rescue mission. This was a demonstration of capabilities that represented the cutting edge of American military technology and tactics. Now, Commander Mitchell said, let me address the question I know all of you are thinking. Why am I leading this mission personally, and what qualifies me to do so? She clicked to a new slide that showed a photograph of a compound in Afghanistan, clearly taken after some kind of military action. Smoke was rising from several buildings, and the image had the chaotic appearance of a recent battle. 3 years ago, I led a joint CIA Special Operations rescue mission that freed 14 aid workers from a Taliban compound in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan. The operation used many of the same technologies and tactics that we will employ tomorrow night. She clicked again, and the screen showed a series of official commendations and citations, including one signed by the President of the United States. That operation was successful because it combined traditional special operations tactics with innovations in technology and approach that had never been tested in combat. It required trust between team members from different organizations who had never worked together before. Tank found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about Commander Mitchell. The commendations on the screen represented the kind of recognition that was only given for extraordinary achievements under the most difficult circumstances. More importantly, she continued, it required someone who could coordinate between the various elements of the team and make real-time decisions about technologies and tactics that were unfamiliar to everyone involved. She turned off the screen and faced the assembled SEALs directly. I am not asking you to follow me because I am a better operator than you are. I am asking you to follow me because this mission requires someone who has successfully integrated experimental technologies with traditional tactics in a combat environment. Rodriguez felt the last of his doubts beginning to fade. The evidence was clear. Commander Mitchell had not only planned operations like this before, she had led them successfully. Now, she said, I need to know who is volunteering for this mission. As I said yesterday, anyone who chooses not to participate will face no negative consequences. She paused, looking around the room at each of the SEALs. But, I also need you to understand that this mission will only succeed if every member of the team is completely committed. Doubt and hesitation can get people killed when you're operating with new equipment and tactics. Rodriguez stood up first. Ma'am, I volunteer. Chen stood next. I'm in. One by one, every SEAL in the room stood up. Tank, Ace, and all the others. 24 men volunteering for a mission that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. Commander Mitchell nodded slowly. Thank you, gentlemen. We have 18 hours to prepare. The next 6 hours will be spent on equipment familiarization and training with the stealth insertion systems. After that, we'll conduct a full mission rehearsal using a mock-up of the target compound. She picked up her briefcase and prepared to leave, but then turned back to face them one more time. One last thing. What we're about to attempt has never been done before. The technologies we'll be using are experimental, the tactics are untested in this type of scenario, and the timeline is compressed beyond what anyone would consider ideal. She paused, making eye contact with several of the SEALs. But, for Americans are going to die if we don't try. And, I believe that this team, with these tools, can succeed where conventional approaches would fail. With that, she left the room, followed by Agent Thompson, Major Rodriguez, and Colonel Martinez. The SEALs remained standing for a moment after the door closed, processing everything they had just learned. Finally, Rodriguez broke the silence. Well, gentlemen, I guess we're about to make history. Or become history, Tank added grimly. Chen gathered his notes and prepared to head for the equipment familiarization session. Either way, those hostages deserve our best effort. As they filed out of the briefing room, each man was thinking about the next 18 hours and what they might bring. They were about to attempt something that had never been done before, using equipment they had never seen, led by someone they were just beginning to trust. But they were also about to try to save 4 innocent lives, and that made everything else worth the risk. The modified C-130 climbed steadily through the night sky over the Mediterranean Sea. Inside the cargo bay, 25 figures sat in uncomfortable silence, each lost in the private thoughts that came before every dangerous mission. The aircraft's engines provided a steady background hum that masked the sounds of final equipment checks and quiet conversations. Rodriguez adjusted his gear one final time and glanced around at his teammates. In the 18 hours since the final briefing, they had transformed from skeptical warriors into a cohesive unit focused on a single objective. The intensive training with the stealth insertion systems had gone better than anyone had expected. The equipment was revolutionary, but intuitive enough that experienced operators could master it quickly. Commander Mitchell sat near the front of the cargo bay, reviewing intelligence updates on a ruggedized tablet. Even in the red lighting of the aircraft interior, Rodriguez could see the calm concentration on her face. Over the past day and a half, she had proven herself in ways that went beyond rank or credentials. During the training exercises, she had demonstrated not only familiarity with the experimental equipment, but an understanding of small unit tactics that impressed even the most experienced SEALs. 15 minutes to drop zone, the loadmaster announced over the intercom. Tank checked his altimeter and breathing equipment one final time. At 38,000 feet, they would be jumping into an environment where the slightest equipment malfunction could be fatal. But the stealth insertion systems had performed flawlessly during testing, and the weather conditions were ideal for the operation. Chen studied the GPS display on his wrist, watching their position relative to the planned drop zone. The flight path had taken them exactly where they needed to be, avoiding Syrian air defenses and Turkish border patrols with precision that demonstrated careful planning. 5 minutes, came the next announcement. Commander Mitchell stood up and moved to the center of the cargo bay. Despite the noise of the aircraft and the tension of the approaching jump, her voice carried clearly to every member of the team. Gentlemen, in 5 minutes we begin an operation that will either save 4 innocent lives or demonstrate the limits of what technology and training can accomplish. She paused, looking around at the assembled SEALs. Whatever happens in the next few hours, I want you to know that it has been an honor to work with you. The cargo bay door began to open, revealing a star-filled sky and the lights of distant cities far below. The wind noise made conversation impossible, but none of the SEALs felt the need to talk. They had said everything that needed to be said during the long hours of preparation. Rodriguez moved to the door and checked his equipment one final time. The stealth insertion system felt strange compared to the traditional parachutes he was used to, but the training had given him confidence in its capabilities. 30 seconds, the loadmaster announced. Commander Mitchell moved to the door beside Rodriguez. In the red lighting, he could see her checking her own equipment with the same methodical precision that marked all professional operators. 10 seconds. The green light flashed, and Rodriguez stepped into the night sky, followed immediately by the rest of the team. For a moment, he fell free through the thin air at 38,000 feet, watching the lights of the other team members scattered around him in the darkness. Then, his stealth insertion system deployed, and he found himself gliding silently through the night toward a landing zone 30 kilometers from 4 Americans who were depending on people they had never met to save their lives. The descent took nearly 40 minutes, but it felt like seconds. The stealth systems performed exactly as advertised, allowing each team member to land within meters of the planned location without making any detectable sound. Rodriguez touched down in the rocky desert terrain and immediately began gathering his equipment, following procedures they had rehearsed dozens of times in the past day. Within 10 minutes, the entire team had assembled at the rally point. Commander Mitchell conducted a quick headcount and equipment check, then led them toward the compound using a route that avoided known observation posts and patrol patterns. The approach march across 30 kilometers of desert terrain took exactly 5 hours and 42 minutes. They moved in single file, with Chen leading using night vision equipment that allowed him to navigate around obstacles and threats that would have been invisible to the naked eye. As they approached the final ridge overlooking the target compound, Rodriguez felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with the transition from preparation to execution. Everything they had trained for, all the planning and rehearsals, came down to the next 20 minutes. Commander Mitchell positioned the team along the ridge and used handheld surveillance equipment to confirm that the intelligence picture remained accurate. The guards were where they were supposed to be, the hostages appeared to be in the expected location, and there were no signs that the rescue team had been detected. Phase 1 in 60 seconds, she whispered into her radio. Rodriguez moved into position to neutralize the northeastern guard post, while Tank and Ace took responsibility for the crew-served weapons positions. Chen prepared to breach the building where the hostages were being held. Phase 1, execute. The next 3 minutes unfolded with the precision of a carefully choreographed performance. The perimeter guards were neutralized silently and simultaneously. The crew-served weapons positions were secured without a shot being fired. Chen breached the building and began moving toward the hostage location. Hostages located, Chen's voice crackled over the radio. 4 individuals, all appear conscious and mobile. Rodriguez felt a surge of relief. Intelligence had been correct about the hostage location, and the Americans appeared to be in good condition. Phase 2 complete, Chen reported 60 seconds later. Moving to extraction point with 4 packages. Commander Mitchell called in the extraction helicopter and established a defensive perimeter around the improvised landing zone. In the distance, Rodriguez could hear the sound of vehicles approaching, but they were still several minutes away. The MH-60 helicopter appeared over the ridge exactly on schedule, using its stealth capabilities to approach undetected until the last moment. The aircraft touched down just long enough for the rescue team and hostages to board, then lifted off and disappeared into the night. Mission complete, Commander Mitchell reported to the command post as the helicopter turned toward friendly airspace. For packages secure, all team members accounted for. Rodriguez looked around the cargo bay of the helicopter and saw 4 confused but grateful Americans who had never expected to see another sunrise. Next to them sat 24 SEALs who had just completed one of the most technically complex rescue operations in the history of special operations. But it was Commander Mitchell who drew his attention. She sat quietly near the front of the aircraft, speaking into her radio with the calm professionalism that had characterized her throughout the operation. No celebration, no dramatic speeches, just the methodical completion of a job that had saved 4 innocent lives. As the helicopter flew through the night toward safety, Rodriguez found himself thinking about the past 3 days. He had started with questions about Commander Mitchell's qualifications and credibility. He was ending with absolute certainty that he had just served under one of the finest leaders he had ever encountered. The stealth insertion systems had worked perfectly. The intelligence had been accurate. The planning had been flawless. But, most importantly, the team had functioned with a level of trust and coordination that made the impossible seem routine. 2 hours later, they were on the ground at a secure facility in Jordan, where the rescued hostages were receiving medical attention and debriefing from intelligence specialists. The SEALs were also being debriefed, but their process focused more on lessons learned and improvements for future operations. "Gentlemen," Commander Mitchell said as they gathered for the final debrief, "what we accomplished tonight will be studied and analyzed for years to come." The integration of experimental technologies with traditional tactics opened up possibilities that didn't exist before this operation. She paused, looking around at the assembled team members. "But, more importantly, we proved that trust between professionals can overcome almost any obstacle. You trusted me to lead this mission, and I trusted you to execute it flawlessly." Rodriguez raised his hand. "Ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, what happens next?" Commander Mitchell smiled for the first time since any of them had met her. "Next, you gentlemen return to your normal duties and pretend this mission never happened. The technologies we used tonight will be refined and improved based on your feedback, but it will be years before they're ready for widespread deployment." "And you, ma'am?" Tank asked. "I have other missions to plan, other technologies to test, other teams to work with." She gathered her equipment and prepared to leave. "But I want you all to know that this has been one of the most professionally satisfying experiences of my career." As she reached the door, she turned back one final time. "Oh, and, gentlemen? The next time someone walks into a room and every person present stands up without being ordered to do so, pay attention. You might be meeting someone who will change your understanding of what's possible." With that, Commander Mitchell left, disappearing back into whatever shadowy world had produced her and the remarkable operation they had just completed. Rodriguez sat quietly for a moment, processing everything that had happened. 3 days earlier, he had been a SEAL team leader following a routine training schedule. Tonight, he had participated in a rescue mission that represented the future of special operations. "So," Jin said quietly, "I guess we know why everyone stood up when she walked into that briefing room." "Yeah," Rodriguez replied. "We just didn't know what we were recognizing at the time." Tank nodded. "Some people earn respect through rank. Some earn it through connections. Some earn it through politics. And some earn it by walking into impossible situations and making them possible," Ace added. As they prepared to return to their normal duties, each man carried with him the memory of a mission that had pushed the boundaries of what they thought could be accomplished. They had worked with technologies that seemed like science fiction, executed tactics that defied conventional wisdom, and followed a leader whose background remained largely mysterious. But, most importantly, they had brought 4 innocent Americans home alive. In the special operations community, reputation is built on stories that are passed along in quiet conversations in places like mess halls and briefing rooms. The story of Commander Mitchell and the mission to rescue 4 hostages from a Syrian compound would be one of those stories, told and retold whenever operators gathered to discuss the evolution of their profession. Years later, when other SEALs asked Rodriguez about the most remarkable leader he had ever served under, he would tell them about a woman who walked into a briefing room and commanded the respect of 24 elite warriors without speaking a word. He would tell them about someone who understood that respect is not automatic, but earned through actions, not rank. And he would tell them to pay attention when they met someone like that, because they might be about to learn something that would change their understanding of what leadership really means. The mission would remain classified for decades, the technologies would slowly make their way into operational use, and the 4 rescued Americans would return to their lives without ever fully understanding how close they had come to death. But the SEALs who participated in the operation would never forget the woman who proved that the most powerful command authority comes not from the insignia on someone's collar, but from the respect earned through competence, courage, and the willingness to share the same risks as the people you ask to follow you. No rank was spoken when Commander Mitchell entered that briefing room, but every SEAL stood because they recognized something that transcended rank, something that spoke to the fundamental values that define the warrior profession. They had recognized a leader worth following into the impossible.